listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. Before we get started, make sure you find us on Facebook and Instagram at Range Minded Podcast and leave us some feedback and a rating on wherever you get your podcast from, because it really does help us out and make better content for you. This is episode 105, where we have our regular special guest, Nick Hoffer, with us, and all three of us talk about staging firearms in the home, in the workplace, and in your vehicle. We go over the who, the what, the where, the when, the how, and the why. As always, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy episode 105 of Range Minded, the in and outs of staging firearms. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long, and I am joined by
Steve Zimmerman in my best Sunday shirt.
Yeah, it's Hawaiian Shirt Sunday. I missed out. And not only that, we do have a special guest as well. Who was our special guest?
Yeah, Nick Hoffer, HofTac.com.
Yeah, one of the most regular guests now on the Range Minded podcast. I think this is number 4 or 5 for you.
Yeah, I've worked really hard to be the number one guest. So.
Well, you've earned it. That's for sure.
It's taken you five visits to actually be there. So.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even have to share this one. I was like, "This is my. I get to be on here by myself this time."
Oh yeah, last time you were here, you were with Terry Piper.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good show. I actually listened to that one.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So
was it any good? Because I don't. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't listen to the shows very rarely. Like, do I listen to a show after we recorded it? Because I did it.
Are you scared to hear your own voice?
Well, I know I sound terrible, so I don't have to worry about that.
You sound great, Steve.
You have a voice for a book, that's for sure. you'd be really good in a book.
Page 1.
Oh yeah.
But if you wrote the book, I wouldn't recommend you narrated it in the audio.
Oh, that's a different story. Like,
yeah.
It's not even a book reading voice. It's like, just keep your mouth closed and use your mind.
Yeah, just write it.
That's what you're saying. Well, when I read, if I read in my mind, I sound like Morgan Freeman, so it's all good.
That's a talent itself right there.
Yeah, that's impressive. I know usually everybody's inner voice is just their own voice, except better.
No, mine's definitely not.
Morgan Freeman, that's impressive.
So when you're driving down the road and you're thinking about something, is that Morgan Freeman too?
No, it's usually Oprah. It's, you got a ticket, and you got a ticket, and you got a ticket.
It's usually on the way back to Boise, isn't it?
I haven't, hopefully I don't jinx myself. I haven't had a ticket in holy cow, probably, I bet close to 20 years.
Wow.
So
now, I've been pulled over more since then, but I've been good.
I just had this conversation yesterday. I think I was telling someone, I go, as many of the Meridian police officers that I work with, I've never been pulled over by one that was a customer.
That would be too easy.
Yeah.
Well, we can't talk about Meridian PD because all the drama, right?
Oh, I can talk about it all day long. They still got to do their jobs.
I think what they did was just fine.
Oh yeah, they're nationally known now. Meridian PD, national stars.
I heard a rumor that incident put us on one of the top watch lists for what's going on in the country right now as far as people rising up.
Well, what bugs me is they don't tell the whole story. They show the 4 minutes of her getting handcuffed and story.
She was a hero in her circle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Except for the gal that filmed the video. Did you see that? She wrote an apology letter.
Really?
The police department.
Did you see Sarah's apology video?
No.
I don't think I did.
Oh, yeah, she did an apology in front of the Meridian Police Department. You got to watch that video. There was a whole lot of crying and regret in that video.
Oh, boy. That's a lot for asking to be arrested.
Yeah. It is what it is. Luckily, that's not really what we're talking about, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's stop that one right here. We can do a whole nother show on that.
Yeah,
but I
no,
don't think
that's the B side to this show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're talking about firearms today, and specifically staging firearms versus storing firearms. We've talked about safe storage a few times, and balancing between having a firearm available to you and keeping your firearms away from prying ears and eyes and hands. But this time we're going to talk about staging firearms in different parts of your house and kind of go over the who, what, where, and how and why between all of that. So I thought first, Steve, maybe you could define for us kind of the difference between storing your firearms safely and staging them for availability.
So in my perspective, how I see it, now this is my opinion and not necessarily the views of Nick or Mark, but in my perspective, as far as staging and storing guns, they're two very different things. So for me, storing a gun is putting it in a safe, locked place until I'm ready to use it, unloaded until I'm ready to use it.
Right.
So hunting or whatever, target shooting later on, I'm not going to get those guns out until I'm ready to use them, and then I'll load them. Now, staging a firearm, in my opinion, it's already ready to use. So I'm going to have that firearm loaded, and I'm going to be strategically placing them in my home or place of business or in my car maybe, where they're secure and only I can get to them. But I also know where they are, and they're not going to be somewhere that's completely visible or obvious to anybody else.
Nick, do you agree with that?
I think I could agree with that. That's kind of my feeling on that as well.
Yeah, so it's the big difference really is just having it readily available or keeping it really in a safe. Those are the big differences. And I think really, the big difference coming down to it is whether you're at your home or you're away from home. If you're at home, especially right now during the quarantine stay-at-home order that everybody's still under, you're going to have firearms in a different kind of stage of readiness. When we talk about staging, I always think of how ready they are to be used. Whereas if you're going on like a trip for like a week or a couple of days or even a weekend or whatever, you're going to make sure that all those firearms are stored safely away where nobody can get at them.
Yeah. And there's lots of different ways to do that. As far as keeping them out of sight, out of mind, I guess. And some of those might include little locking boxes or whatever that we. Yeah, because
you could stage in the Vault Tech and the stop box. Like those are designed for staging, not necessarily storage.
Right. And the downside to those is, in my point of view, is usually they're light enough to just pick up and take away unless you've put them some kind of a steel rope or something around something else.
And I think the purpose of those is more being able to have a handgun sitting out on the table and not necessarily have it seen as a handgun, but that it's there so you can stage in plain sight. I like those. So I don't do a lot of staging around my house because I have 4 kids running around. Even though they're well versed in guns, I still try not to leave stuff laying around because I'm not here most of the time. So
right.
Most of my guns stay at the shop, except for the one that I carry back and forth every day and maybe a rifle that's here. But as far as staging goes around the home, I don't do a whole lot of it. I understand it. When I was single, I probably did more of it, just because I didn't have a whole lot to worry about. Right. But now that there's 4 kids in our apartment, like staging handguns around the house isn't really a big thing. But I do have guns around the shop that are staged, and the likelihood of me necessarily the feeling of maybe needing it there is more than when I'm at home, because I carry a gun on me all the time at home. I think I kind of referenced that to you before. Like, I carry a gun every day and I don't take it off at home until I go to bed.
Well, and that's, I think, one of the best ways, if you want to make sure that a firearm is available to you at all times, is to carry a gun with you even when you're at home, when you're going about your business during the day or whatever, even on the weekends or after you get home for work or whatever, because then you always know where it is. You always know that you can get to it, and you know that other people are going to have a pretty tough time to get to it.
And I think the reason that I'm a little, I take my gun off when I get into the shop, because some of the stuff I'm doing requires me to lean over the counter, lean into a machine, back and forth, and it gets uncomfortable. Like, it doesn't matter what I'm carrying it in. Like, once you're leaned up against the counter, I'm leaned in a mill, or I'm running back and forth up and down. Like, in order to be more comfortable, I'll put it up on the shelf and obviously I have guns readily available to me all day, but I have probably 3 in the shop that are loaded and in designated spots that I know where they are. In case I'm on one side of the shop, I don't have to run around if I needed it.
Right. And so maybe explain a little bit why you kind of have it that way.
So as in, why do I want to have the guns staged, or why do I have them in the place that I have them?
Both.
So obviously I have the gun staged because I want to have access to a firearm at all times. And if it's not on my body, I'm going to need multiple designated spots for that. So for me, in my workplace, I have 3 designated spots. One where I put my carry gun that I take off, which is in my office. And I know exactly where that is all the time if I'm in the office. And then 2 in the shop. So I have 1 on each side of the shop, which my shop's not all that big. So I'm always within 4 or 5 steps of it. So if there was a situation where I was dealing with somebody that I felt nervous or uncomfortable around, I might work my way towards those positions, which is, like I said, 4 or 5 steps in either direction, depending on where I'm at. Being that we're in the concealed carry industry, that's top of my mind. Even though I highly doubt that I'm ever going to need them, it's still top of my mind because I think about it all the time.
Right.
So when I stage a staged firearm, like Steve said, is a firearm that's loaded and ready to go. In my case, they're all in holsters. So trigger guard protection, as safe as it can be without being in a safe and unloaded. They're all sitting in a designated spot with a holster on it. They're all the exact same gun. They're all Glock 19s because that's what I carry and that's what I have the most of. So.
Well, and you bring up a lot of good points there, is that they're loaded, but they're also in holsters. So that way, if you do reach up and maybe your grip isn't the best, you're not going to accidentally have a finger slip into the trigger guard and pull the trigger and have a negligent discharge. So safety is kind of, one of those things you want to think about there, but also that you have the same kind of gun in every single spot. So no matter what, you're familiar with it, you've trained with it, and you know exactly how that gun works and how it's going to operate.
So the only difference in those 3 guns is one has a light. So I have 3 of the same 19s that are set up all the same. One has a light on it, and that's the one that's the furthest into the shop, in case there was a situation where the lights were off. I don't carry with a light. I carry a light with me most of the time, but I'm not a big weapon-mounted light fan because I've done most of my training with like a pin light or a hand light.
Sure.
And because I feel like a lot of guys that carry a weapon-mounted light don't carry a handheld light. Well, I use my handheld light every single day. Mm-hmm. I use my handheld light because you guys have been to my shop. We're behind that fence. I unlock that gate. Sometimes in the dark. I lock it in the dark sometimes. When my apartment was above the shop, I was going in and out of that gate sometimes 2, 3 in the morning, and I used my handheld all the time. The odds of me needing a weapon-mounted light, slim to none. I mean, we carry it because we might need it, but a handheld light is much more usable. And so that's why I like
versatile.
Yeah.
And my problem with weapon-mounted lights is if you're going to clear your home, and I know you can use it to splash off walls or whatever to get that light around, is the potential of using that light to light up a threat and realizing it's a member of my family, where I just flagged them with a firearm, which is one of the I don't.
That's the thing I explain to some new concealed carry guys every once in a while, when we're talking about weapon mounted lights, because I will say right now, 90% of the people that want custom holsters from me are waiting on their weapon mounted light to show up before they bring it in. Mm-hmm. So I have 6 people right now who have reached out to me and said, as soon as the light comes in, I'll bring it in. And so I'm like, well, when I talk to them, when they come in, I'm always saying, hey, so you have a weapon mounted light, you feel the need to illuminate things. What are you doing for illumination when you don't point a gun at something? Because if you need to see what's around that corner, do you want to point your gun around the corner? or do you want a light so that you can see what's around that corner? And that's my big takeaway is weapon-mounted lights are great if you're a cop, but they still carry handhelds.
Right.
Because when they go to a gun, they put down the handheld and go to a gun-mounted light, because now you're not manipulating two things. For us civilians and concealed carriers, I'm going to go to my light first to see what's going on. Now I can either go to a gun with a light, or I can have taught myself how to use a light and a gun at the same time, which is how I originally learned. Weapon-mounted lights 5-6 years ago were not as popular as they are now.
Right.
I would honestly say that the Enforce APL was a big push into civilian weapon-mounted lights because of the price point, because they dropped under that $150 price range.
Yeah, they're a lot more affordable now. And, with every, handgun having, rail mounts, it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to have a weapon mounted light. And if you kind of go by the philosophy, it's better to have it and not need it. It makes sense to have one. But, to your point or whatever, and to Steve's point is that, you'd rather point just a regular flashlight at, a member of your family or a friendly person or whatever, rather than getting your gun out and pointing it at somebody and not trying to operate two things at once.
So then let's jump into this, though. So we're talking about staged guns, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to stage guns, I believe that you should pick the right gun for the situation. You guys agree? So if we're staging a gun in our home, say it's a nightstand gun or a bedroom gun, sure, I'm going to say Glock 17, extended mag, Surefire X300 Ultra mounted to it, as well as a handheld light on the nightstand. That's 2 lights. And that's also 18 to 22 rounds, depending on your extended mag on that gun. Right. Reason being this: I don't want to reload. Like Steve said, I don't want to point my gun at my family. But when I go from the handheld light to my pistol, I can drop the handheld and I can go full on to a full frame gun with a full size light, all the lumens you could imagine. And now I'm in the fight, because now I've decided that I'm in the fight. I've went to a weapon mounted light, and now I'm good to go. Yeah. That's if I'm not going to go to a rifle. That's my pistol go-to stage.
Well, then, so let's do this. So if you want a pistol with a weapon-mounted light and an extended magazine, why not just stage an AR-15 right next to your bed?
That's a valid point, and you could do that if you wanted to. I'm more proficient with a handgun than I am a rifle. One, because I spend most of my time developing handgun skills. Rifle skills might be a little easier. I don't necessarily want to go to a rifle in my home if I don't have to. For me personally, I would probably stage a shotgun before I stage an AR-15.
Well, especially in your circumstance where you're in an apartment.
Yeah, I have people on 3 sides of me. So, and on the far side of me are my kids' rooms. So as far as over penetration, an AR-15 is not really an option for me.
Sure.
As well as for a shotgun, choosing the right ammunition so that I don't penetrate through walls into the next apartment is a big deal.
Well, and that's a really good point that you bring up, is that when you're staging firearms, and even I would say considering what firearms to use for self-defense or home defense or whatever, is you have to consider your environment. And if you share walls with people, or if you have a home, or maybe you have neighbors that are really close to you, or a townhome, you really have to consider the environment that you're in and that you may be using that firearm in, because like you mentioned, Nick, an AR-15 may penetrate through multiple walls, including your neighbor's walls, whereas
you have
a shotgun,
no idea what's going on.
Right.
No idea. And I don't know. Here's the deal. I know that the apartments are somewhat similar, but I don't know if on the other side of my bedroom wall is the other master bedroom, or if that's the kids' room, because I haven't been in. So I don't know how they have their furniture set up. I don't know any of that. So over penetration is a big deal. Whereas, like, if I had my own house, I know where my kids' beds are. I know what their rooms are. I know everything inside those four walls. Where
and
I'm at now,
you don't share walls with anybody else.
exactly.
Yeah,
And just like at my house, I had made a plan of if something happened and I have to leave the master bedroom to clear the house, this is how you do it. Well, I know that in the apartment, but like we said, I don't know what's going on inside of my four walls of my building.
Right.
Only inside of the walls of my section of the building. So
Right.
it really depends on where you live. And like I said, I don't have gun staged here. I do at the shop because I know exactly who comes into those areas, exactly who has access. Whereas at the apartment, especially now, I'm at work all day. There's 5 other people at the apartment when I'm not here. And granted, I trust every single one of them with a gun. But sometimes you don't. You can't trust kids by themselves to not be curious.
Well,
Right.
It's not just your kids; it's their friends that you have to worry about too. You don't.
Well, my kids don't have friends.
Well, I can see why. You're their dad. Gosh. Just kidding. Just kidding. You know, it's interesting. I just thought as you were talking, Nick, like all 3 of us have covered those 3 dynamics. You live in an apartment building. Mark, you live in a more urban area where your neighbors are close, and I'm kind of stuck out in the country where I have a little bit of room.
Right.
So Steve just the shotgun. You just fire that up in the air.
Yeah, 2 blasts, pop, pop.
Yeah.
You're done. Yeah, that'll scare everybody off.
It works. That's what somebody said once.
I don't know if he remembers saying that.
He doesn't. He doesn't. He doesn't remember who he is half the day.
Yikes.
Yeah, so for me, like a shotgun or an AR-15 is a viable option. I probably wouldn't choose a full-size AR. I'd probably jump to an AR pistol, and there I'm not scared to put a weapons-mounted light on it because I need both hands anyways.
And I think with what Steve said, like depending where you live, that also makes up who's going to be the person that might be the intruder. So an intruder in my apartment might not be a heavily armed intruder. They could be somebody who accidentally breaks into my apartment thinking it's someone else's.
Right.
Or
Sure.
is drunk and doesn't know where their apartment is. Whereas if you're breaking into Steve's house, you didn't just stumble into where he lives. You might have went there because you had a reason to break in there. And
Yeah,
so
it'd be more planned
they might
and
be
premeditated,
more heavily armed than somebody who thought that my apartment was theirs and couldn't figure out their door code and busted in.
Right.
Yeah, I think the
And that
population
happens.
density is a big thing to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as where I live, it's a fairly safe, part of the state. There's not a lot going on. I know all of the local police officers, which helps too. But we're getting a lot of new people moving in all over the state. We get a lot of new people, and maybe some of them have different reasons for moving here and have different ideals than I do. And
I guarantee you there's somebody moving here and they're like, we are going to rob Steve's house. We're
they
coming
want the church. They want the
Southern
church.
California, and we heard him on the Range Minded podcast. We researched where he lives.
That voice
He's
is
the world's
awful.
foremost expert on finished carpentry. I want his tools.
We're going.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you really have to
coming in heavy.
you really do have
Coming in with
to
a gas.
you have to consider the situation, the town that you're in, the environment that you're in, where you live. Definitely some big considerations. But Nick, you bring up a good point too about if you have staged firearms in your house and you have a family or you have multiple people in the home, you have to think about, okay, who's going to have access to those and who do you trust to share maybe the locations of those staged firearms with, or do you not stage them at all? Like you said, you've got some kids, and no matter what, kids can get curious. But maybe if they were older, like 18, 19 or something like that, would that change the situation at all?
I mean, it could. I mean, my kids at 18, 19 years old have probably been exposed to firearms a lot more than I was at 18, 19 years old. So I know that my 12-year-old son, he won't touch my gun or even the magazine he'll come to me and say, hey, I saw your magazine fell on the floor. And I'll be like, well, go pick it up and put it on the nightstand.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is. Like, he comes to me and tells me. Or he comes and works at the shop 2 days a week now because they don't have school. And if something's out of place and he sees that there's live ammunition, he comes and asks me, hey, do you want me to handle that? Even though we go shooting, he owns his own guns. He's responsible for the maintenance and taking care of his own guns. But he knows if I haven't told him that's okay, that's not something that he does. So even at the shop, he doesn't know where those staged guns are. I don't put live ammunition in the shop outside of those staged guns. We have some loaded ammunition, but it's not live or using for different things. Kind of like snap caps, but I actually use bullets in casings, but they don't have primers or powder in them because we don't need them to go into guns. But even then, he doesn't know the difference. So he'll come to me and be like, he'll hand me a handful of bullets and be like, hey, where do you want these?
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's good. Even though he doesn't know the difference between the live and the dummy rounds, it's still a habit that he's creating, which is fantastic. I think it's very responsible and commendable.
But even then, I still don't feel comfortable to leave him in the apartment with staged guns that curious kids that are running through the house go next to the couch, and we have a gun staged somewhere on the far side, and he goes, well, why is this here? Oh, or like you guys said, their friends are over and their friends aren't, and they're like, oh, well, just show me what that is. Yeah. And even though they say no, we know how peer pressure works, and like they're like, oh, well, I know what I'm doing, so I can be safe,
right?
And I move this, or they're trying to be responsible and say, oh, well, I'm just going to move this into mom and dad's room, and something happens. Like that's not a situation that I want to be in, especially in the industry that I'm in and the side of the industry where I'm selling things to people to keep their firearms safe. I don't want to be anywhere near an ND or anyone in my immediate family with an ND.
Right.
So that kind of stuff goes through my head all the time. Like, is it worth staging the gun, or should I just wear my pistol till I go to bed or get ready to take a shower? For me, I just keep the gun on me.
Yeah, no,
that's the best choice.
And I live in a second floor apartment, so dragging a safe up here was not even considerable.
Hey,
so
I've delivered safes over there to second floor, third floor.
Oh man, I don't even want to think about it. So like keeping the stockpile at the shop and just keeping a gun on me, and I have a black rack in the truck, so I know I have 2 rifles in the truck, and I got my gun on me. Like I'm pretty comfortable with myself with that. But I mean, if you need to have 6 ARs around your house and you're the only person there, more power to you. I mean, I watch Colleen Noir, and he's got guns all over his apartment.
Yeah, he sure does. So, well, and that you bring up 2 good points there is that, having stuff all over your house, may be good when you're there, but what about when you leave? Maybe, where do you draw the line to put everything back in the safe? Maybe you're just going to the store for half an hour, or you're heading on a weekend vacation. I mean, where even being a single person, like take Colleen Noir, like I just said. So he's single, he lives by himself. He's got guns around his apartment. But do we really feel like if somebody breaks into your apartment and they have full access to just grab and go, is that something that we're okay with? If you live in certain states, you're responsible for that. Right.
Idaho's not one of those states, but other states, if your gun is not locked in a safe and there's a crime committed with that gun, you're responsible because you allowed them access. Even though they broke the law and went into your personal property and took it, they hold you accountable.
Because you didn't secure your property.
Yeah, so you got to take those into consideration. And for me, like when I had my house and I lived by myself and I had my son every other week, I probably had I had guns around that weren't in the safe, and it's not worth the liability. Like criminals do stupid things, and I would feel guilty if a crime was committed with a gun that I left that could have been in a safe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I agree. At least I definitely don't disagree. For me, like I say, I have a shop where I've got a big Rhino safe at the shop. I've got a place to secure a gun in my vehicle, and then I got my safe here. I haven't gone as far as
Well, I see how safe your safe looks. It's wide open over there. Run over there.
It's for effect, you see.
Yeah, but I don't see any of my patches on there. What do I see? Gemtech, Salient Arms, Strike Industries, 2A.
No, and there's a reason is these companies gave me those patches.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
There it is.
I know. Adam Boyce said the same thing. He's like, hey, where's the Spartan mode patch? I'm like, I don't know. Where is the Spartan mode patch?
Well, he gave me one.
I don't know. Is there any Patriot trays inside that safe? I'm sure I've given you some of those.
Come walk with me. Let's see. But yeah, there might be 1, 2, 3.
Oh, look at that! Look at that! See that? There we go. That's because my stuff is being used. Those patches are just for looks.
Well, Nick, you're all about
Right.
utility. You're not all about show. You're all about utility.
For now. We're about to get a lot more showy here soon.
There you go. Well, Steve, let's talk about your staging. What do you have? Because yours is in the country. You're staged out a little bit differently. What is your setup like?
Well, I did used to stage a little bit in my home, and the more kids I got around the house, the less comfortable I was about it. After preparing for this podcast today, I had come up with some things in my mind, and maybe it's something that I end up, creating and selling or something, and maybe something that Nick wants to get involved in too at some point is it kind of like the tactical wall idea, but just with my own twist.
I'm glad you touched on that because that's been rolling in the back of my head. Is we need to touch on tactical walls and some of those cabinets.
Yeah.
And I had an idea for a couple different. In fact, I've even bought the hardware already. And my son's almost 18. He's getting close enough, and he spent a lot of time behind guns. So in his room, we talked about it today. When he turns 18, maybe it's time for him to be a little bit more responsible too. And I actually found some fingerprint scanners that are pretty reasonable, fingerprint locks that I'm going to try some things out and see how it works. I plan on staging something in my kitchen where it won't be so obvious. My concern is always not letting any unauthorized users get to it, including my children that I don't think are ready to do that yet.
Right.
So it's something that I still have to game out a little bit more and figure out what I'm going to do with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Is that it's not one option, one idea, one decision, and then you're done. I think staging firearms and stuff is a constantly evolving situation. You always have to kind of reassess and assess and check again about, okay, how has my situation changed? Maybe I've moved from one apartment to another, from like a second floor apartment like Nick has, or to a first floor apartment, or to a townhouse, or to a single family home. Or maybe I have kids now, or maybe I'm with somebody who has kids and, they haven't been trained in firearms. You always kind of have to reassess. And for example, like with this one,
Right.
With the quarantine and stuff, there was talk about people, not acting rationally and there being shortage of things. And so I kind of took that as a sign myself, maybe, and you might call it paranoid or not. I wanted to make sure all the magazines I had were loaded up and ready to go if I needed to have those,
So I kind of want to touch on something that Steve just said. Obviously, he's talking about building something to stage a firearm.
Yeah.
And so I think tactical walls are a great idea. I think that if you own your home, that's a great option.
A viable option, yeah.
I had considered doing that when I owned my home. Now that I'm renting, it's not really an option to chop a giant hole in the wall and put a mirror over it. But if I was going to stage a firearm in my apartment that was not in a safe, one of those cabinets or shelves, I think tactical walls offer its own. Lots of guys do the flag murals.
Yeah.
That would be the way that I would consider staging. I wouldn't let everyone in my home know what's there, but at least I would know that I could stage in that. And so I had mentioned Bolt Tech and Stop Box earlier. I'm a big supporter of Stop Box. Like I have one at the shop and I have one in my truck. I have a cable tie on a pistol that's in my truck. I don't know if I think I mentioned it. I had a pistol stolen out of my truck when I was out on a boat. Lake Lowell and Nampa, they stole stuff out of like 6 trucks in 20 minutes. Yeah, but they popped the locks on our doors and stole my cell phone and stole my pistol that I had left in there. So now I have a black rack behind my seat with both of my rifles. I have a shotgun and an AR-15 behind the seat of my truck that are locked in. And then I also have a Taxol X-Ring rifle back there, but it's not secured. It's just behind the seat.
Man.
Because I want to get to that quick because I like to shoot ground squirrels when I'm out. In fact, today we went up to Silver City and I almost stopped, but there were so many Mormon crickets I didn't want to get out of the truck.
Oh yeah.
But so I stage stuff at the shop. I stage stuff in my vehicle, but I use certain mechanisms to still keep them safe. If I was going to stage in the house, something that was more hidden, less visible, and not letting anyone know it was there, and still having some sort of a secure, I guess, locking mechanism, even if it's RFID or magnetic, is still more secure than having it tucked in the couch or sitting behind the light or laying on my nightstand or in the drawer.
Well, I tell you what, I just watched a video earlier today where, it's a couple, it's a husband-wife couple, and I don't remember the name of their training academy, but they're instructors, and they filmed this video about staging firearms in their home, and they straight up said that they had young kids in the house, but nothing to really secure the gun. They were hiding them in kitchen cabinets and laundry room cabinets, in their closets, like between clothes. And I thought, oh, wow, seriously, like this, how is this even responsible?
So at this point of staging guns, like you just said they're doing, at what point does it not make more sense not to just wear your gun
all the time
while you're at home? If I have to stage 10 guns in my house, I might as well have it on me because I'm gonna forget where I put all those.
And maybe it's time to think about relocating where you live if you're not worried.
But here's the thing. I don't think that those guys are staging guns because they live in a bad neighborhood. They're staging guns because in their mind they are trying to be prepared. But the ultimate way to be prepared is to have a firearm on you.
Yeah,
be it at home or be it going to the grocery store.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we're far more likely to be robbed at home than at a grocery store.
I'm just worried about getting sick if I go to a grocery store.
I'm tired of worried about it. I'm just going to get it. I don't care anymore.
I signed up to go get the antibody test on tomorrow, Monday.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a couple places here in Boise that are offering it. It was $105 because I don't have insurance.
I talked to a fella here in Idaho Falls. I don't remember who I was talking to exactly. I do now. Yeah, that's right. I was talking to a purveyor of collectible goods in Idaho Falls. I don't know if they want me to say who they are, but he was saying that somebody they know actually worked in Wuhan somewhere else, and this was like in December, and they'd come home, they got sick, and they got over. They just thought it was, a cold or the flu. He's like, I wouldn't be surprised if half of Idaho Falls has already had it, and nobody knew.
Well, I had a discussion with a lot of guys that came from SHOT Show, and we all agreed that, the symptoms were pretty much the same, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of us had gotten it. That's why I want to get the antibody tests and see if I've had it. I probably haven't. I've been going on and on telling people I thought I've had it, but probably haven't. But
well, you get sick at SHOT Show anyways, just because.
Yeah, but I've never been sick, and I never miss work. And I didn't go. I stayed home and cried in my bed because I couldn't breathe for like 2 days.
You probably did. Because we know, for those who've been to SHOT Show, know that there's a lot of Chinese people there taking pictures and getting kicked out of SHOT Show.
So there's not only a lot of Chinese people there that are scalping product, but there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of product there that came directly from China
That's
And
true.
there's a lot of companies there. Like, I know for a fact in my side of the industry, in the holster side, like Gun and Flower, they're from China, and they hit me up every single day to try and sell their product. And they have a huge booth there. So it's not like we were hiding from it. And it was Chinese New Year.
Yeah, there's that
like,
too.
We were catering to them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Eventually this is going to be over, and our governor says we're not going to go back to normal till we have a vaccine, so we might never go back to normal.
Well, and I've heard from other places that the vaccine may be as soon as 18 months, if ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. I can't wait that long. That's why I'm just going to live my life. I'm done.
I mean, if a symptom was losing your hair, you wouldn't be worried at all.
No, I'm not. I don't care.
No, he's got immunity to that.
It'd actually be kind of nice to get rid of some of the back hair anyways.
Oh, wow. Thanks for that.
Can you send pictures afterwards?
No, I cannot.
Just the mark.
They'll get deleted off Facebook if I try that.
Oh, man.
So we went over staging firearms in the home. I talked about staging them in my office and a little bit of staging in the vehicle. Do either of you guys stage in your vehicle? Do you carry anything besides what you have on you?
Yep, I do.
I don't want to know what. I don't need to know exactly what, because we don't want people to be curious. But they probably know my truck's marked. I probably, but feel free to steal the stuff out of my truck.
I'm not left without resources in my vehicle, and no matter, like, in my wife's car, I don't, unless we travel, and then I have more than one, just in case. I just want to. My perspective is I always want to be able to get home, and so I have the resources a little bit to do that.
So my mindset on that is this. So I carry the carry guns that I carry. Sometimes I switch it up. Most of the time it's a Glock 19, full size mag with G9 ammo. But my thought about my carry gun is it's enough to get me back to my vehicle. And what I have in my vehicle is enough to either engage in the fight or get back to where I need to go.
Distance, yeah.
So I always think it's funny when guys are like, man, I need like 3 extra mags. And I'm like, is that range gear? No, that's just for every day. I'm like, good God, what kind of like gunfight are you getting in? Yeah. And if that's the case, what do you carry in your truck? Well, I don't carry anything in my truck. And I'm like, well, if I was you, I would want to get out of the mall and back to my vehicle if I can. If I need to engage from there, then I'm covered.
Yeah. In defensive gun uses, very rarely do people have time or the need to exchange a magazine out.
You know what I think of? When it comes to like my truck gun, I think of this: the beginning of World War Z. Where like they're driving down, all of a sudden it just like breaks out, and they're in their minivan or whatever it is, and they have to like ditch the minivan and get into the motorhome, and they're in the motor, and he's a government agent, and they have to go from the motorhome to go get the medicine, right? And he's got a hunting rifle, and that's it. So what I'm thinking is, at least if I have to get into something, I got 16 rounds on me in my gun. And then if I get back to my minivan, I got a rifle and I got a battle belt in the back seat. So I can switch to my range duty carry for my pistol. And I got AR mags on that. So I got ready to go and I can take that gun, and whatever I got to go to from there, I'm on my own. But at least from there, I'm ready to go with something that's common. I'm not carrying 10 millimeter. I'm not carrying 300 Win Mag rifles. Like, I'm carrying stuff that I can find on the street, and that's what I'm prepared for.
Yeah.
But any of the other stuff, that's the scenario that I planned for. The beginning of World War Z.
Well, you sound like you're very prepared for it.
Too.
Yeah, but no zombies have come yet.
I was hoping that was going to be what happened with this COVID stuff.
Like, these guys didn't even start dying. Like, they died and they stayed dead. Yeah, I was like, when do those refrigerator trucks like just bust into zombies. Hasn't happened yet. So
well, maybe it will. You never know.
My saddle belt will stay behind the seat, unfortunately.
Yeah, well,
unfortunately.
That brings up a good point, though, is that, you know, you not only can stage firearms in your home or you're at your work, but also in your car as you go from place to place. And Steve, you brought up a good point, too, where it might depend on, you know, if you're just taking a quick trip to the store or if you're taking a road trip across your state or across a couple different states, depending on if those laws, you know, pertain to you.
That's something
you've got to consider that.
Vehicle, you got to watch interstate laws. So.
Yeah, very much so.
Luckily, we don't really travel, you know, much far out of the Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Utah corridor, anyways. So we're still pretty well covered. But this is what I get all the time: is, are you seriously gonna take that? Yep, I am. and we haven't needed it, but what if I do need it?
Better to
have it. What if World War
II
breaks out when you're in Utah?
Well, and you know what? She'll be happy then.
Yeah,
my dad will be able to get home.
Exactly. You know what's funny is I used to get that, like, you carry that everywhere? Yeah, why not? Well, okay.
Carry so you don't have to.
At this point now, they'll be like, do you have your gun with you? Yeah. Oh, okay. Or the kids will be like, do you always have your gun with you? Yeah. Oh, okay.
It kind of turns from a weird thing to like a reassurance almost. Isn't that strange?
Yeah, it's to where you didn't bring your gun today. What's wrong with you?
Oh yeah, I do that. I do that sometimes too. Like I'll leave and I'm like, wow, I didn't grab I gotta go home. Even though I know I have 4 staged or some staged around it, I'm like, oh well, I gotta go back because I can't carry those, even though they're in holsters and just fine. Like, if I take those from the shop, then I'll have to bring them back. I gotta go home.
Right.
Yeah. Which makes me think of something. I know we already touched on it a little bit. If our listeners are, you know, if they're thinking about staging something, and I think you brought it up, Nick, is making sure that it's in some kind of a holster or something to protect that trigger guard. Because when we get into panic mode or bump in the night, our reflexes to grab a hold of something tightly, and if it's in the wrong place, I mean, I'd hate to accidentally shoot myself or, God forbid, my family member.
Taking that little bit of time to unholster that gun and ditch that holster is that little bit of mindset, like preparedness, that allows you that split second to slow down and get into the frame of, okay, I'm holding a gun instead of. Yeah. So the guns the guns that are sitting on the shelf in the shop, they're in holsters. So my thought on that is this: if I have to grab those and I'm going to the fight right away, I can grab that. I can shed that holster immediately fast. I know how to use both hands. I can dust that up. But if I don't need it and I need to take that gun with me, I can grab that. I can put it on my body and I can go to where I need to go. If I get to where I need to be, say it's outside in the parking lot, as I'm headed to the parking lot, I'm putting that holster onto my body and wearing the gun, because when I step out the door, I don't need to be brandishing a weapon if it was kids playing with fireworks. But if I step out the door and it was somebody in a gunfight, now I can go to that gun.
Yeah,
and that
that's
just
smart.
Gives me those different, and if I need to use the gun, I can now reholster the gun and not have it in my hands when law enforcement shows up. So my thought on reholstering is I only need to worry about reholstering to keep myself safe from being a man with a gun.
Right.
Whereas, like, everyone talks about, like, well, you can't reholster fast. Well, I don't need to reholster quickly. I need to reholster so I can have my hands free.
Right. Yeah, that's good thinking.
So there's a whole lot of thinking towards staging guns. That's not just sticking them between your sheets or in the closet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah, and plus, like, you know, oh, sorry. I was going to say, and if you have a holster, like you're saying, you don't want to walk out there and like brandishing a firearm, and then all of a sudden, well, you're done. You're right. You And maybe it's to the point where I don't want anybody to know that I have that gun as I'm coming out anyways. Maybe it's better for me to not have that gun deployed yet. Because in my point of view, if I have that gun deployed, then I've consciously made the decision that I'm going to be using that gun. So that's a pretty serious step for me to want to just walk out there with a gun in my hand.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like Nick said, it's, it's a big difference between having a gun holstered on you and being a concealed carrier and being a guy with a gun. I think you can't put it any simpler than that.
Well, yeah. When law enforcement shows up on a scene, they heard man with a gun or shootout. They didn't hear Nick Hoffer from Hoftac Industries just got into a shootout and took down a bad guy. and I'm going to deploy my concealed carrier badge to them as soon as they show up.
Right.
No, they don't. But just like I said, I've been pulled over a lot of times by Meridian PD, never by a customer, and I've worked with a lot of them. So if they show up on scene, I'm a bad guy, and I know if I get into a shooting, I know I'm going to jail. That's why I have insurance towards that. But I want to be able to not have a gun in my hand and look like a threat. Like, I'm going to comply. I'm not going to ask them to take me to jail, but I'm going to comply. You know, I threw that in there.
Yeah, that was smooth. Yeah. But no, that's...
None of us in Idaho paid to go to jail.
No. And that brings up a good point. Like you said, is just... You have to consider kind of the before, the middle, and after. Is that before you get into a situation, the during, when you are in a situation, and then the aftermath. And I think too few people think about what the aftermath could be, and you really do have to take that into consideration and really plan that out ahead of time. Yeah,
the aftermath is probably something I think of more than the actual situation. Like, the idea of me wanting to get into a shooting is very slight. Like, it's the last thing I want, because I don't want to have to deal with what goes through my mind and the repercussions of that happening. But if it had to happen, I'm prepared for it to happen. But I've talked to so many people, because I've never been in a gunfight. I've never taken a life. And the aftermath of taking a life or getting arrested for taking a life, there's so much more than... A shooting happens in seconds. The aftermath is years. Not only the mental aftermath, but the legal aftermath is years.
Yeah.
It surprises me working, because I've worked the counter for a while. I've sold a lot of guns, no matter what, handgun, rifle, shotgun. And there is a percentage of those people that I think glamorize a self-defense shooting in their own mind, thinking maybe even how awesome it would be. And it's crazy that you see those people that they almost want to get into that gunfight. To me, I don't know if they have to.
Well, here's the thing, Steve. As instructors, as people who have instructed people, being in a shooting would help me and you sell ourselves well. But that is the last thing I ever want to be in.
I don't want to be in a defensive.
Like, I don't want to be like, I've been in a shooting and here's what happened. Like, that's not what I want. Even though people would be like, "Oh, well, he's credible. He's been in a shooting."
Yeah, nobody who's actually a responsible, firearms owner and somebody who trains wants that to happen.
That's like saying the only viable paramedic is somebody that's almost died in a car accident. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
But somebody who's almost died in a car accident can tell you what you're going to go through.
I suppose so.
Yeah,
I guess I'd rather take their word for it, though.
Like, I talked about on the last podcast that I was on, episode 100, I think it was, about how I had been in a situation where I could have used lethal force. I had a gun in my face. I could have used lethal force, but I was on the phone with dispatch, and I was able to get out of the situation without using lethal force, even though I had a gun on me. I had my hand on my gun. But the last thing I wanted to do was shoot. I had a lot less training back then. I was fairly new. I had only been concealed carrying for a couple of years. But even now I look back and I go, I'm so glad I didn't make the choice to draw a weapon, because would I have hesitated and somebody gotten shot? Or would I have drawn my weapon and shot and killed somebody and now had to deal with that for the rest of my life? Because it washed out. Everything was fine. I was pissed that the person did what they did, but nobody got hurt. And it could have been a lot worse situation if I had the mindset of I had the right to do more. Because I did have the right to do more, but the right decision was not to do anything other than what I was doing.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Coleon Noir because he's talked about that in a couple of videos about, he calls those people that are almost like itching for a fight. They call him, I wish a blank would kind of person. And I can't think of a better way to call it, somebody who's just itching for that to happen. But anybody who's got I think a good head on their shoulders really is, that's the last thing they want to have happen. We just want to be prepared, you know?
I think it's that we're not scared to be in a gunfight, but the last thing we want is to be in a gunfight.
Yeah, 100%.
So if there is anything you can do not to be in it, you'll do it. But I'll tell you right now, if you come at me raging with a knife, I'm shooting you. Because knives scare me more than guns.
Well, but that's part of being prepared and having firearms staged in your home or your place of business or in your car, you know, just because you're being prepared and you're ready for any situation.
Yeah,
absolutely. So,
and I think I think it's important that if you are planning on staging guns, like some of the takeaways we've talked about are your circumstances. Oh, look, I have a visitor behind me. Are your personal circumstances, like, do you have children in the home or people that maybe come to your home often? Are you going to just use a Vault-Tec or a lockbox like that? Or are you going to go to some kind of a furniture option? Those are all things that you have to decide for yourselves. And you really have to war game every scenario, honestly. You really got to think about it. Is it even worth staging? Maybe it's not worth staging a gun at all. Like, you know, Nick, in your home, it's really doesn't make sense at all to do it. Yeah,
it might just be better to have it on you at all times.
Yeah.
So this is something that before you guys told me this is what we were going to talk about. I mean, I've considered it, I've thought about it, but I never really got too deep into it because I'm like, you know, I don't do a whole lot. I do it, but I don't think about it. I don't talk about it. So if anybody listening to this has any more insight on like maybe what I should be doing or has a different opinion, I would love for them to message me and let me know because I'm definitely. We probably should have done this on video because now I can't stop laughing.
For anybody that's just listening, so Nick and I can see each other. We're on a video call, and my youngest daughter came in here and decided that she wanted to be seen, and she's giving me shoulder rubs and making faces, and so it's half the fun, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's part of this whole quarantine thing. We can't be at the store right now, so we're in quarantine.
Yeah. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
There she is.
Anyway, where were you, Nick?
No, so I was saying, anybody listening, like, feel free to reach out to me, email, direct message on social media, and let me know your thoughts on the whole staging thing, because we've talked about a lot of things, and a lot of this I've kind of gained through as we've been talking, because I knew I didn't want to stage in my apartment. I know that I stage in the shop, but I haven't considered, like, what other people should do in their situation, because I really don't share that with a lot of people.
Right.
And some things you just don't want to share. I think staging a gun or even carrying concealed, because it's a personal choice, it really shouldn't be something you vocalize anyways, in my opinion.
If you come into my office, take 3 steps through the front door, 1 step left, reach up and behind your back, and that's where the first gun's staged.
But you have to be standing on the floor mat at the same time.
And you have to be 5'9.5" like me.
Right, or else it's not going to work.
Yeah, you'll be in the wrong position.
Yeah. So I think we'll close on that, though, for now. I think that was a great, lively discussion. If you have any questions about staging, we're happy to help you. Podcast at iishooting.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Range Minded Podcast. And Nick, where can we find you?
You can find me at Hoffer Industries on Facebook and Instagram, as well as hoffer.com online.
Great. So thank you, Nick, for joining us as always. We always appreciate your time, and thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys. Be safe.
All right, same. We'll talk to you guys later.
See ya. Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.